What is going on, ADPI Nation? I am your host, Kevin Brenner, and we're here with another podcast. Guys, I feel like I haven't podcasted forever. Actually, it's true. I haven't recorded a podcast in over a month because I was in Miami for a fun conference, and then I was terribly sick, which sucks. And then I went to Italy for 10 days, which doesn't suck. Totally doesn't suck. And I found out our guest just now, who's joining us, was also in Italy while I was in Italy. Small world. Probably cross paths in Florence, looking at cool churches and things like that. But regardless, today's episode is going to be really, really exciting because our guest today has a very interesting background from the going to the Naval Academy to playing football. And as you guys know, I'm a big sports fan. Not really. So go sports. But I will try to keep up with the football knowledge with the Roger Staubach Trophy and the Joe Bellino Silver Helmet Award. Anyway, Keegan here has won a bunch of awards in football, which is really cool. But that's not what this podcast is about, because if it was about football, we'd have a very dry conversation because I know literally nothing about the sport. But we're not here because after Keegan graduated from the Naval Academy, he had an opportunity to go play in the NFL, and he did it for a bit. He got washed out and he was like, oh crap, what do I do? Found real estate. And that's where our story takes off, because remember, this show is about the military real estate investor from all backgrounds. And Keegan has a very interesting backstory and interesting story about how he was able to find success in a super hot market. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're in San Diego, or you're in Austin, Texas, or you're in New York City, or you're in Washington, D.C., or you're in Miami, or somewhere where the market is just crazy and you think you can't get started, this is the episode for you. So Keegan Wetzel, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kevin. Appreciate the intro. I'll try to keep our acronyms just to military ones and not football ones for the purpose of today. But a couple might slip through.
There's football acronyms too.
There's got to be. I can't think of any offhand, but there have to be.
There have to be. X's and O's and whatnot, things and such. So yeah, dude, like your story, I want to jump right into it because it is relatively unique. And you've had a lot of kind of almost epiphanies. Like I think a lot of investors and a lot of people who are active in the space and listening to this podcast, they may have had that one epiphany that I'd had when you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and you're like, oh my God, I don't have to have a W-2 and work 40 to 60 hours a week for the rest of my life. Side note, when I was in Italy, and I know you were in Italy recently as well.
Yeah.
They don't work nearly as hard as us. Like, not even close.
It's so interesting. They have a different pace of play.
They are just like super chill. And they're like, I was talking to some guy and he was like, yeah, like I work like 30 hours a week or whatever. And I think that's a lot. And I was just like, dude,
they seem to like always be in a rush. The European mentality. They're always in a rush to get somewhere. But when they get there, they don't seem to have a lot to do. My wife and I were remarking, we're in Venice and the streets are like 2 feet wide some places. Like you can't even pass somebody without like turning because the buildings are built so close together. And we were joking, like all you heard all day was like some Italian man or woman on their AirPods behind you, like CCC, ciao, 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 CC, ciao, 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 chasing you down. But then they get to the coffee shop and they're there forever. They don't actually, I don't know. It was different. Yeah. Very different mentality for sure.
But anyway, Italy was fun. But really, your story, your background story, football. Talk to me about football and how you started with that, and maybe how that shaped some of your decision making as you went through and went into the Navy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could have I think anybody who's done anything in competitive athletics at a high level could like talk on that for days about how that's shaped every other thing they do in their life, from their diet and their fitness to how they approach their relationships. Like, is it a goal? Is there something they're trying to get to how they goal set on any other endeavor in life, be it professional or personal. If they're just setting something out for themselves on a book they're going to read, like how do you approach that? I think competitive athletics have shaped all of that for me. I didn't really realize that as a kid, but sports are important in our household. Growing up, I took to a couple of them. I would say basketball was actually my first love. But as things would have it, playing basketball on the south side of Chicago in high school and being like a sixth man that was out there just to get 5 fouls as a football player, football was clearly the course that was going to have more success for me. So football was a blast, and I had an opportunity to play for some great coaches at Navy. I played under Ken Niumatalolo, who holds tons of records at Navy. I played with some amazing, amazing guys. The brotherhood there is real. and learned a lot of important lessons just about overcoming adversity, being able to size up what's in front of you and say like, hey, I might not have what it takes right now, but if I'm willing to put in the work over time, I do believe that I can become the person or develop the strength or develop the skills to do this thing. And that corresponds like 100% with investing, because at any given time, you or I might not have the funds or the knowledge or the network to get something done. But if you size up what it is you want to go accomplish, and then look at an amazing community like the ADPI community, there's so many resources out there that you can use to build your skill set, to build muscles, just like you're training in the gym, right? To build the mental muscle, or build the ability to run numbers on a spreadsheet, or build the relationships and the influence with your network to be able to go accomplish that. So competitive athletics, in my opinion, have shaped the way that I do everything. But that doesn't have to be someone's background, I wouldn't say, to be successful in real estate investing. Case in point, right? With people who might not be as big of fans, football fans, that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I'm the guy, I like playing the sports rather than watching them. But football was never really my thing personally. But I will say, I totally agree with what you're saying on that mentality piece, because, as a relatively athletic person, and I played a lot of sports growing up, I can take that lesson away, and even joining the military and figuring out, okay, what's the next level? What's the next level? What's the next level? How do I get there? How do I perform? You take all of those lessons learned, and you say, okay, well, if I just, apply, it's like a function of mathematics, really, right? It's time and focus, and and you're putting the energy in, and it's a repetitive process, and eventually you will get good at it. And I think that's something that in our culture we take for granted, because it's constant. Like, everyone wants that instant gratification. Oh, I'm going to be a real estate investor and I want to close on a deal in 3 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks. Well, that might not happen. I mean, and if it does, great. And if it works out for you, even better, because a lot of the times people get into deals like that and they're not great deals. But it doesn't happen overnight. So it's going to take some perseverance. And I would agree that competitive athletics
I think you just need to reverse engineer and back out a little bit of what's the actual goal, right? Like, is it to close on a deal? Yeah. Is it financial freedom? Is it a tax strategy? You will see people who played competitive athletics or who didn't, who kind of just like stalemate in life, right? They just stop learning. And I think a lot of us who have done something maybe well, whether it's in the military, your job, professionally outside of the military, your job, if it's sports, if it's whatever it is, and you've done it well, you've performed at a high level, there are people who then don't want to try anything new because there's a risk of failure involved. And there are people who know that the only way they got to where they were in that endeavor was by failing a lot along the way, because at one point in time, you knew nothing about whatever that endeavor was. So the same thing applies with investing. The more willing you are to learn about what tools and skill sets there are out there, the more likely you are to be able to put together a plan of action that's going to fit you and your goals, right? And that's been so invigorating for me personally and my wife. And I'm sure we're going to dive into a little bit of what our goals have been and what we've done along the way.
Yeah, definitely. So talk to me briefly. So you're at Navy and you're doing well. What position did you play?
Played outside linebacker. I was going to say safety. I still am married to the idea that I was once a defensive back. That lasted like 3 days at Navy. Might not mean anything to you, Kevin, but defensive backs are a little bit more athletic than linebackers. So I want to hold on to this image that I was like really athletic, even though maybe I wasn't. So anyways, played linebacker.
Okay. So you played linebacker and you started doing really well towards the end of your time there, and you had an opportunity to go pro. What happened with that?
Yeah, so I didn't get invited to the combine. That would have been very cool. I did not get invited to that, but I got invited to a couple of other combines, subsidiary ones, and then had a workout and an invite and got to be on the Ravens for a little bit. And then later got picked up as an undrafted free agent by the Chicago Bears, went to minicamp with them, went through minicamp a little bit, had some cool experiences there where like I turned my ankle one day, so I was late getting the tables, and I got to sit down, and we're from Chicago, so I'm a huge Bears fan, and got to sit down with like some of the key players. There was the Jay Cutler, Matt Forte, Brandon Marshall era, and got to like eat food with them, but I look back on those memories pretty fondly. I think all in it was like 2 weeks that I was with the team, but it was a whole summer worth of training to get there. And then the Navy was kind of like, you either owe us money or you got to come back. You're out of leave. So then that was that, and I went back to my service selection, which at the time was actually submarines. I came out as a nuke. but I'd missed my class up because I was training to go to the NFL. And so I had like 5 or 6 months to kill before the next class. And I lost like 30 pounds, but I was in terrible back pain. And I finally started getting that checked out and ended up having a couple of fractured vertebrae, which was gnarly, and ended up redesignating me to go into the supply corps. So then I went supply and then never set foot on a ship. I actually ended up working in Navy Special Warfare and then with helicopters in San Diego for almost 6 years. So it was kind of a wild ride there for a little bit. And then it evened out and ended up being pretty fun for a short while.
So, and I'm completely naive in this direction, but like, had you because it's obviously super hard to make it into any professional sport, like super, super hard. So like, had you gotten picked up, would the Navy be like, okay, cool, you're good? Or would the Navy be like, all right, you just got this big contract, you got to pay for your college, and then, and then we're fine? Or
yeah, probably the latter.
Yeah.
The thing is, and this is a good metaphor for like life and why real estate investing or just taking control of your life has become so meaningful to me, and why I dedicate my career now professionally as a real estate agent and a mortgage broker to helping people do that through real estate. That's the vehicle. But really the goal is just taking complete control of your own life, because in that scenario, you make an NFL team, childhood dream, right? Like you're the 0.01%. The Secretary of Defense could still be like, even though you have a $4 million signing bonus as a rookie, no, you need to come and serve your time, right? Roger Staubach had to serve a couple of years before he went to play. Like, it just depends on who the Secretary of the Navy, the Secretary of Defense is that year. You're really not in control. Even going to the NFL, like, you're really not in control. Making a team, like, you could be the best player, but if that team has veterans they need to pay and a coach who can't afford to take a risk on a new player because their job's potentially at risk, like, you might not make that team. It's like right time, right place, right position, right coach, right opportunity, right salary cap. Like, even getting to the highest level of competitive athletics,
so many factors at play.
You're really not in control. No. How many, there's always like you may not know these names, like the Kurt Warner stories, or guys who went undrafted that become Pro Bowlers, Hall of Famers, right? Tom Brady's going to go down as the greatest quarterback of all time, 7th round draft pick. Like, you can be the best. And if you don't get the right opportunity at the right time with the right coach, the right salary cap, right position, right team, like, you may never, ever have that shot. You're really not in control. And for me, real estate investing, I'm going to tie it back to the conversation here, is like, that's something where you are in not complete control, like markets volatility. There's still things out there, but you are in a great deal more control of your financial future and your ability to control your time, money, effort, and impact in this world through that than any endeavor I've ever pursued. And that's what got me so on fire about it. And that's what got me on fire about then turning around and helping other people do the same.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that's the biggest thing. I talk about it all the time is time. It is our greatest commodity. People always say, what's your commodity? Oh, it's money. No, it's not money. It's time. Money comes and goes. And in fact, once you figure it out, money's not hard to make. I'm in a position now, and you're probably in a similar position, where money's harder to invest than it is to make. And it sounds like conceited and ridiculous, but I'm just like, oh man, what do I do with this? And it stresses me out when I look back on myself. You look back 10 years and you're like, oh man, I wish I had all this money. And what do I do with all this money? It's not the money, it's the time. How can you make that money buy you effectively more time to do the things that you want to do with those people? So like that level of, I think that's like kind of like second level of like wealth building and knowledge, like that epiphany level for listeners of this podcast. Don't worry about the money that you need to get to the down payment, to do this, to do that. No, think higher level. Think about how can you free up your time? Where is most of your time spent right now? And what systems can you put in place to free up that time to eventually, move out of that position? Because that's the greatest commodity, man.
And you got to have something you want to do with that time. It's just not going to be that meaningful to you until you value it more than the Navy or the Marine Corps or your CO or your platoon commander or whatever it is. Like, until it's more valuable to you than it is to them, it's going to be hard for you to fight for that. But once you decide what you want to do with that, and for my wife and I, 5-6 years ago when we were dating, we decided like the most important thing to us, potentially the only thing that you can really leave on this earth, is the relationships you have with other people and the impact you can bring positively, hopefully, to those relationships. Relationships require a lot of time. Like, there's no fast forward as much as you want to like online app date or whatever. Like, there's no fast forward to developing a relationship. It requires significant time. right? And very intentional investment. And when we decided that that's what we really wanted to leave, and I have a couple of case studies there with clients and friends, if we want to dive into those later, on the impact you can have through having time. And the vehicle that we used to help other people develop that was real estate, to develop money, and so they could have time and impact. That became the most fulfilling thing we could possibly seek out ourselves. And it totally lit me on fire about 4 years ago for real estate. And that's been really the primary focus since.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a little bit, because we're following your story, and effectively, not effectively. I mean, you failed in the NFL, and we talk about failing forward, and we talk about what that means. But then what? You're in the Navy. You're in terrible back pain. Obviously, you had some sort of injury. Hopefully, you get fixed up. But you get moved to supply. So you're in supply, and you said you're in San Diego, right? Like, you were there for the entire 6 years of your military commitment. Is that correct?
I was. Yep. So got there as an ensign. Um, you have two supply officers on a SEAL team. You have an O3 and an O1. So you have a lieutenant and an ensign. And my boss, unfortunately, got fired shortly after I got there. So then we're getting ready for our first deployment. Head to Iraq with the SEAL team that I was stationed with as their supply officer, with about 40 different engineers called CBs in the Navy's, supply types, LSs, gunner's mates, and a handful of other rates to go out there and do the support jobs, do communications, do fuel, water, food, weapons, all that stuff. And I just took the same approach to that, Kevin, that I had taken to everything my entire life, because it's all I knew. It was like, okay, this is what's right in front of me. I'm going to learn it and be the absolute best I can at it. And that lasted about 2 years. It was a lot of fun at times. It was a lot of work at others. It was always something new, because everything you learned in supply school didn't apply to SEAL teams and Navy Special Warfare. And then once you deploy to CENTCOM. Well, that AOR is controlled by the Army, so none of Navy Special Warfare systems apply. You got to learn all the Army systems. So it was just a constant learning battle. But at the end of 2 years, we were getting ready for our second workup, and I was really trying to love it. Excuse me. But I reached, and a little bit vulnerable, but I think this will connect with probably a lot of listeners. Like, I just reached a state of total apathy. I was like, I've tried so hard. I tried so hard in school to be an engineer at the academy and follow through on my vision there. I tried so hard in football. I tried so hard at the SEALs. I've done the best I can, and I found next to no fulfillment in this whatsoever. And I had probably the most gorgeous drive to work for 5 years. Drove over the Coronado Bridge every single day for 5 years. Got to deal with a little traffic, but one of the most like blessed commutes you could have in the country, maybe in the world, to get to your job. And for almost a year, my final year at the SEAL team before I got rotated, I just went through really deep depression, total apathy. And I remember driving over that bridge and just being like, I definitely don't have a death wish, but if somebody just ran me off the bridge, like, nothing would really change. The world wouldn't change. Nothing would change. I felt like no matter what, I just couldn't make a difference. In my role, in my specific job, I just didn't feel like I could do much more. And that I wasn't doing that good. Like, I wasn't really making a difference. And every job in the military is important. And I hope people don't feel that way. But I know this is planet Earth, this is real life. People do. And that's how I felt. And I went on a quest the next couple of years before I really found real estate, just trying to figure out like what my purpose is. For me personally, that led to faith, and that led to relationships. And those both required a lot of time to be able to do them well. And I realized that saving money in after-tax W-2 dollars and trying to invest it at a 5 to 7% clip in an S&P 500 ETF was not going to be a very quick way to get to live my life. I was still going to be giving the majority of it to an employer. And no matter what my next phase of life was, once I got out of the military, because I had decided to do that personally. So a lot to unpack there, but that was kind of the timeline of events and how things transpired.
No, I think it's completely relatable. I felt the same way. Working as a weather officer, I was like, man, this job is so easy. Like, it wasn't challenging. It wasn't fulfilling. My fulfillment personally was driven from a lack of challenge. And then I would talk to my commander. I would literally tell my bosses, I was like, guys, this job is like really, really easy. Is there something more I can take on? And they told me, they're like, well, you're not at that rank yet, and there's other people ahead of you, and the bureaucracy and the blah, 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 blah. And I was like, all right, so I'm just going to do my thing here. And it was just like boring. And I was like, what? Okay, this can't be my future for 20 years. And oh, by the way, in my specific career field, I was like pretty much capped out at lieutenant colonel. Like, unless you were like really hot shit, you might make 06,
Right.
but like that was it. But like when I joined the military, I was like, man, I'm going to be a 4-star general, you know, like I'm going to do this. In the Air Force, it's like, unless you're a pilot, that ain't happening. So
Right.
it's
Right.
like, so it's like, okay, well, let's reevaluate and, you know, and finding your purpose, like that is so powerful. And I love, Keegan, what you're talking about with relationships, because that
Well, there's nothing.
I agree with the
There's
impact
nothing
that
wrong.
relationships.
That's what became most important to us. That doesn't mean that it has to be what's important to everybody and the reason they do it. Like I love Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. When Ben Affleck's telling him like, you're an idiot, you got to get out of here, you're better than this. And Matt Damon's working this like low level construction job. And he's like, what's the problem with laying brick? Like a mom needs a place to live. She needs to raise her kids. She's raising them by herself. Like this house is going to put a roof over her head. Like that's good. That's honorable work. And I 100% agree with that. And that's many jobs that we have in the military. And I wish that I was in some sort of profession that allowed me within the military to stay in that and really feel fulfilled in that every single day, because those jobs are meaningful. But for me personally, just in the job that I was in at the place and time that I was doing it, to your point where it was like, you had a dream, you had a vision, you had a goal. I had one too. And it was just like that I would have more impact than I was having as a supply officer. It just wasn't there for me. So I started really aggressively looking left and right. Like, okay, I got to get out of this. I got to do something else. What is it? You know? And that's where I was.
Yeah. Yeah. And so where does real estate come into play? Because you're in San Diego. Like, so for a lot of our listeners, we talked about at the top of the show, it's like, okay, great. You know, maybe you find real estate. Like my path first was I went and got my PMP, my project management professional. I was like, project management, that's what I do at work. I can be a project manager. That sounds pretty cool. I get paid.
It's more letters after my name.
Exactly. I went through that whole thing. I studied for the test and I got the books and I did the whole thing, passed the exam, did the whole thing, got the certification. And then I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was like, man, bump that. I'm going to do this real estate thing instead. Turns out it's a lot of project management. But from your perspective, you're in San Diego. I mean, what was your epiphany moment like with real estate? And then what was your follow-on epiphany of like, oh crap, I'm in San Diego. How do I actually get started in this?
Yeah, it was a little bit twofold. It started for me with wanting to create more time, have more financial freedom. I actually thought that was going to be buying businesses. So as I was kind of looking at the field, I graduated from the Naval Academy in 2013. So I was looking at a lot of like 07, 08, 09 grads, guys who were and gals who were 4 or 5 years ahead of me, to see what they were doing. And by and large, the people that got out went and got an MBA from like a top 10 MBA school. So I looked at that and I was like, that must be the next step for me, right? And I analyzed doing that, but it didn't really align with my goals. I looked at taking on, another $100,000 of debt. Well, I didn't have any, but taking on $100,000 of student debt, or using your GI Bill if you had the full GI Bill. But the time it would take, probably 2 to 3 years. And then you would really want to invest 2 to 3 years in another career. So at that point, you're probably 6 years post your minimum 5-year commitment, right? So you're like early 30s, 32, 33. A lot of my friends from those classes had a spouse and a kid or two and a mortgage or two at that time. And I was like, man, if you take a bet or a gamble on doing that path, if I did personally, and then I decided 6 years down the road on that I didn't like it, there's a lot more risk to making a change at that point than there would be now. So I was like reading a lot of books, following a lot of entrepreneurs, listening to a lot of Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins at the time. I thought buying businesses was going to be my next path. And so I was like, I'm going to skip the MBA route. I need to go get a high commission sales job and just learn a sales skill. And I was an engineer. I was a systems engineer. Like I wasn't definitely not the nicest person ever. I definitely wasn't that personable or outgoing. I don't think. Like I had a lot of training that needed to take place. So I was like, I need to go learn a sales skill set and sell a high margin product so I can have a high commission job, save a lot of money, and then start investing it. So I got into software sales, and I wanted to sell to the DoD because I felt like it would still align with my moral compass of being a part of the mission if I was selling a good product and helping people use it better. So that's what I pursued. And then about 2.5 years into that route, and I went back to go up. I mean, I took a job at 27 years old, working with like 22-year-olds, doing 150 calls a day to learn the skill set. I went way backwards in salary, like took a big step back, just bet on yourself type of mentality, right? But About 2.5 years into that, I was walking through an open house on a weekend with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and this former Navy chief that was like 5'6", found out that I had a VA loan that was unobligated, and he was on me like a hawk, following me around everywhere. I was like, dude, get away, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that with real estate agents, but you know what it's like when you get like a financial advisor or a real estate agent that reaches out to you on LinkedIn. You're like, okay, here we go. I've seen this show, rode this ride. I have the t-shirt to show it, you know? And this dude's following me all over this house, this gaudy pink foreclosure in Point Loma. And he literally flips over the back of a napkin when we're like trying to leave, and shows the rough numbers for buying a duplex with a VA loan. And I was like, that's pretty compelling. And so he asked if we could get coffee. I gave him my email because I didn't trust him with my phone number. That's how little I trusted real estate agents at the time. And he still holds it over my head. I only gave him my email, and I waited like 3 weeks to get together with him. But he unlocked something when I saw the numbers where I was like, there's something about the scale here. And so I started running the numbers, and I was like, wow, if you buy 2 units, your cost per square foot is like 60% of what it would be buying a single family unit. But the rental income you're getting is like 95% of what you get for a single family, 3-bed, 2-bath. If you have a 3-bed, 2-bath that's part of a couple of townhomes, you get like 95% of the same amount of rent you get for that single family home. I was like, so your debt goes down by like 60 cents on the dollar, but you're still bringing in like the same amount of rent. And so it just unlocked something in my brain. I started researching the VA loan and found out you could go up to 4 units. I was like, whoa, this gets interesting. Let me start doing the math on this. And then I looked into how like fixed term debt worked, and my family, probably again, like many of your listeners, W-2 family. My father served in the Marine Corps. Both of my grandfathers served. My sister's an Osprey pilot, also went to the Naval Academy. It's go to school, get a good job, pay for your education through service if you need to, or, you know, keep your loans as small as possible. Just don't take debt and work on something until you can retire. And it's a fantastic philosophy, and I'm really blessed for the amazing upbringing I had, but I didn't ever think that debt was good or that I could use it in a positive way. So I started looking into how to use 30-year fixed term debt. And I was like, wow, this is pretty compelling. I mean, the advantage of borrowing $1.5 million today and only paying like at that time 3 or 4% on it, and the time value of that asset over 30 years and the opportunity I have versus the risk that the government is taking, that Ginnie Mae's taking, backing that loan, I was like, that's actually a huge advantage to me. I used to think they were taking advantage of me by giving me debt. I'm like, I feel like I get to take advantage of them. They're on the hook. They have to outlay all this cash, right? And I get all the advantage of that cash working for me for 30 years while I have this really, really tiny debt bill. And I have rental income coming in to offset it. I was like, this is interesting. So COVID hits, and I'm living in North County in Encinitas in San Diego. And I'm just kind of waffling on this idea, like maybe someday in the future. And our landlord evicts us because he's afraid that we're eventually not going to pay rent because we're in like the first month of COVID. And he gives us like a 60-day notice.
Do that?
I guess.
He was just like, were you like not paying rent at the time? Or
no, obviously
like,
we're
all right.
He was like, I don't know. He got scared. We were only on a 7-month lease when we first signed that because they wanted to release us in July or something like that. And they gave us like a 60 or 90-day notice before any eviction moratoriums could go into practice. And it just forced my hand. I was like, okay, I'm buying a place. And I started reaching out to my network, and I couldn't find a single person that had ever used the VA loan on more than a single family. Couldn't find a single person that had ever used a VA loan on more than $1 million home. And I was looking at like 1.7, 1.8, 4plexes, like big debt bills per month. I didn't know anything. Dude, I didn't know walls had studs. I didn't know what a foundation was. I remember doing my sewer inspection, and I was more concerned that like a couple of bathtubs were missing drain plugs than I was that we had so much stuff in the crawl space that we couldn't see the foundation footings. And I kept going back to that with my agent. I was like, but the drain plugs, like we need drain plugs. Like I just knew absolutely nothing. So that's how it came about.
So you ended up getting this fourplex. Yeah. Is it the same one that you're in right now?
It is. Yeah. We moved out and then moved back in. So what I came up with was I wanted 4 units, but the way that I could create the most equity was to buy a 3-unit with an unpermitted but already built 4th unit and then go through the permitting process. And so that became like my criteria for my search. And then my real estate agent, Todd, who's a great dude, Todd Bush, changed my life. Amazing guy. Has since moved to Texas, unfortunately, because he would be great in the San Diego market. But he was like, what about this really nice duplex? I was like, Todd, 3 units, unpermitted 4th. And I had him driving all over town for me. I was like, I want to see this one and this one and this one. I mean, there weren't that many. There were like 5 total that I found. We offered on the one that I'm currently in. It was listed at 1.5. We offered 1.4. We did not get it. Went to escrow. I'm searching, super bummed. And like a lot of buyers have to go through this. You have to miss a couple before you realize, like, I really have to come kind of strong with my offer. Then it comes back on the market. And I sent it to Todd and he's like, I don't know, like the agent wasn't really that good to work with. I was like, let's go again. It comes back on the market at 1.4. Sorry, we'd offered 1.41 the first time. Yeah, that's right. It comes back on the market at 1.4 and they didn't call us and they listed it for less than we initially offered. So I was a little bit like, well, Todd, could we go like super low on this thing? Maybe snag it at like 135. He was like, do you want the house or not? I was like, okay, I want the house. So we offered what they were asking, got under contract, closed on it like 25 days later. And then it was off to the races. I needed to put appliances in and I, was on YouTube, learned how to change water heaters on my own. And I didn't want to hire a property manager because I didn't want to give up the 8 or 10% margin on monthly rents. So I learned how to write leases on my own. And I was reading, hundreds of pages on California tenant landlord laws. And long story short, those 3 additional units produce about $9,000 of rent per month. My total debt bill on the house is $7,270 or something like that. So it's $1,700 cash flow to the positive, plus we live for free, plus we pay down $3,400 in principal per month. So the one property is, like a $70,000, $80,000 towards our net worth per year before any depreciation and before any appreciation. And that allowed us to save money at such a rapid clip. We're able to just start buying more and more and more and more and more really quickly. And through that, I then just wanted to tell people about it. I just wanted to educate. So I wasn't a licensed real estate agent. I wasn't a mortgage broker, but I was spending all my nights and weekends just teaching people how to do this. And I was, finding them the property.
Who would listen, you become like an evangelist almost.
Oh, absolutely. It was just oozing out of me. My wife would have to be like, oh, let's relax a little bit. It's just like,
let's pump the brakes a little bit here, guys.
Anybody that would listen, sometimes she was like, I don't know if they're quite on board as you are, and most people weren't. I just thought it was like such an obvious hack to the system, but not everybody was. I would say like 1 out of 2 people probably were, but it didn't even occur to me that somebody wouldn't want to do that because I wanted freedom financially so bad that I would have lived in the studio unit at this 4 unit. I would have slept in my car to buy this, to make it happen. I would have done anything. And that's not everybody's mentality, right? But I didn't really understand that at the time. So that first year I helped maybe like 10 people buy multifamily places and I was doing everything. I built a cash flow calculator spreadsheet. I was teaching them how to run the numbers. I was finding the property. I was giving them the agent, giving them the mortgage broker. I was helping them write leases, find tenants, show the unit to tenants, change water heaters, fix appliances, you name it. We were doing everything. And obviously over that period of time, a lot of people were like, at this point, you should just become an agent. And I was like, no, that's not who I am, not what I do. And it took maybe like a year of doing that before I was like, you know what? This is the most fulfilling thing I do every day is getting to talk to people and teach them about what I've learned and how, if they want to, they can just take back a little more control in their own lives. And that led to where we are today.
That's awesome. So, dude, our stories are so similar. It's like I'm having deja vu in my own head listening to your story. It's like,
yeah,
you start out buying the quadplex and you do this and yeah, man, it's so powerful to know that you were able to succeed or find a level of success in that high market. Because when I bought my first one, it was in Savannah. And for comparison's sake, you bought and obviously this is total apples to oranges situation. We're talking completely different markets, but you bought yours for 1.4, right? Essentially a quadplex, a 3-unit with one unpermitted thing. You went through the zoning process. Where I bought my first quad for 350. So like completely different. Yeah, but like completely different. I obviously wasn't getting $9,000 a month in rent. Like when I took it over, they were renting it for $700 a month. It should have been going for $1,000 a month, but the, old lady who I bought it from was, she didn't have the internet. So she was like literally, like penny savers. That's how she was advertising her
Oh, that's
apartment.
amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that these stories are everywhere. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're in one of these high markets and you just have been putting it off and you're like, oh, I'll just wait till I PCS to somewhere else. Don't, because this all goes back to the core concept of this entire podcast is time. Your time on this earth is limited. And the more time that you can free up by creating, by literally creating an ecosystem for yourself where you are chasing a financial freedom, and you get that freedom part, that time, that allows you to make more of an impact on other people. And that, to me, that positive impact, that's where fulfillment comes from. I get fulfillment and joy from doing podcasts like this, from talking to people like you, because I don't have to do this for my health. I don't know, Keegan, are you doing this for your health?
No, well, maybe for my mental health.
Maybe.
I think I like it. I think it gets me out of bed in the morning. But I mean, no, the obvious answer is no.
The point is that we do these things because they're fulfilling and they're fun. And that's what life can be about. So if you're not in that position right now and you're listening to this podcast, you can be by simply, educating yourself. And it's not going to come easy. Like, I don't know how many hours, Keegan, you said you spent reading the landlord tenant laws and writing your own leases and learning how to change water heaters and doing it. Like, this stuff didn't just osmosis go into your brain.
No, dude, I've got to be one of the only people on the face of the earth that's read the VA lender handbook from front to back. It is not fun. Not fun. Yeah, that sounds but fun. It's important to know. It gives you everything you need to know on how to maximize that loan. Well, to your point, Kevin, I've got a couple of like testimonials or stories that I think are really impactful. If you want me to share them, kind of on that note of people who just started with like, well, let me just take one step forward and see what it looks like. Like you said, in a high market, because you can definitely do it here. And I think the difference in a big market is you got to buy on cash flow on day one, but really where you're going to make your money is appreciation. And there's a big difference between 10% year over year. Let's call it 5%. It's like 6.4% last 30 years in San Diego, but let's call it 5%. Compound annual growth on a $1.6 million property in San Diego and $312,000 property in Corpus Christi, Texas, right? Like there's a massive difference on your 10-year compound annual growth. It's like $1.5 million towards your net worth. And then how long would it take you to save $1.5 million in after-tax W-2 dollars at the end of the year after all expenses? And then grow that at 7% in the S&P. Like the amount of time you can gain back is massive. So one or two quick stories that I love to tell because I think you get a commission check or you do something great at work, you get an award, you get a high for like 48 hours, and then you got to go do it again. But you help somebody accomplish their goals. And for me, like some of these stories are 2-3 years ago, and I still wake up excited about them every day. So the first one of the first guys that trust me, and I'll say them by name and you can edit it out if you want to, but they're people who I think would take a call from any one of your listeners probably to give them advice as well. First guy is Andre Evans, Naval Academy grad. I think he's class of 2016. Andre reached out to me shortly after I bought my fourplex, and he had heard I was doing some stuff in real estate and just wanted some advice on how to like upgrade from maybe like a $350,000 place to like a $500,000 place. So he owned a place out in Chula Vista in San Diego. And so I met him for coffee and we had such a great conversation and hit it off. We're both from the South Side of Chicago. I was like, it kind of felt weird. Like my girlfriend was at my place, but I called her. I was like, hey, I just met this guy at Starbucks, but I'm going to bring him back over. We're going to go over some spreadsheets. So I brought him back to my house from the Starbucks, first time we ever met. And we're sitting at my laptop and I'm showing him these spreadsheets I built.
Dinner and you're taking him home. Jeez.
Already got him home. It felt like a little unruly. I know, right? So Dre is just like this. He's such a powerful thinker, but he internalizes everything. I didn't get a lot of physical feedback. So I wasn't quite sure like if it hit or not, or like, and I wasn't a licensed agent or anything. And I kind of showed him the ropes and he's like, so what's the goal? Like, can you sum it up for me? What's the goal? And I was like, most amount of units for lowest cost per square foot ratio to dollars per square foot of rental income you're going to get. The next time I heard from Dre, he was under contract on a $2 million 4-unit in Pacific Beach. That's wow. 4, I think it's 3-bed, 2 baths. It might be 4 2-bed, 2 baths. On Hornblende, amazing property. He's crushed it. Dre's goals were so powerful that all it took was a conversation to like unlock everything he had within him to go get it and to go figure it out. And I didn't even have like all the ecosystem built that I have now with general contractors and mortgage lenders and handymen and property managers and stagers and designers. Everything we built in San Diego, I had none of it then. And he just went out and did it, and Dre has since transformed his life. He's got an Instagram channel. It's awesome. It's Dr. Dr. Multifamily. And he's big into the multifamily space. He's written a couple amazing books that are doing really, really well on Amazon. But his whole goal, which I learned after the fact, was just to make enough money passively while he was a department head to be able to get his, maybe I won't share his whole thing, but to be able to help one of his family members get out of Chicago and pay just like $35,000 a year to get them a rental in like Arizona or Nevada. And that was so strong that he like just moved mountains to get everything out of the way to make that happen. And he was able to do it with one property.
Crazy.
And within 2 years, he was able to pull like almost $500,000 out of that property, right? Like how long is it going to take you to make $500,000 in after-tax W-2 earnings? That was one of the first ones that really got me going, where I was like, man, I think all people in real estate are super slimy, but maybe this is what I want to do. Maybe this is where I find the most fulfillment. The second really, really inspiring story that I have is two service academy grads, Mark and Alicia Powers. Mark's a Naval Academy grad. Alicia's an Air Force Academy grad. They're both brilliant, like Mensa level smart. Mark's a Harvard guy. Alicia's like top of her class at the Air Force Academy. They both have really big jobs, running large departments at really, really reputable companies. I don't know what their W-2 earnings is, but it's really big. It's really significant. They were moving back from Europe to the States and had heard about me through a military investing network called White Feather, which I know ADPI has worked with as well. And they were like, hey, maybe instead of buying a house, we look at this multifamily thing. And I gave them like some pretty basic advice. Again, I didn't even have like everything that I've built out now. And I wasn't in this full time. I was still working in software sales. And they bought a 3-unit in Golden Hill and have since added a 4th unit. They've moved out of that. And then I get to help them as their agent buy like kind of their dream home up on a big hill, acre lot in Escondido. But we're having dinner with them and some friends. And through all the education they have, all the income they have, all the things they've done. I think it was Alicia talking to my wife, and she was like, well, yeah, but put all that like MBA education aside, like the biggest line item on our net worth by far was meeting Keegan and him advising us to buy a multifamily unit with our VA loan instead of just buying some place to live, but actually creating an investment out of it. Kevin, I kid you not, like I think about that. Alicia might not even know that I remember it. I think about that probably like 3 times a week. Like I'm still on fire about that because it's so powerful, Anyways, I share those two, like
that fuels you, that fuels you. And that's the fulfillment that like,
yeah.
And you never know, like, and that's so powerful when you get to a point. And I think this goes for anything that you do, whether you're in the military or not, you get to a point where you're so educated in something, you've done all the self-education work that you can go and teach that subject to someone else. That in alone is fulfilling because you know that the information and advice is solid, and whether they go and act on it or not, that's their own prerogative. But the fulfillment that you can get by simply sharing that positive knowledge, those positive vibes, like the sign says behind, you can't really see it. It says good vibes, but like that sign, like that is how you can make someone's life better. And you did that. And man, I totally agree with you, man. It is rocket fuel.
It's been amazing. So I love what you guys do, right? Like I remember downloading the original ebook from Mark Yan, like when ADPI was a small Facebook community and the basic website. And it's extremely fulfilling. And moreover, like I think a lot of our community gets told like they have a very specialized trait and they should stick to that. I fundamentally disbelieve that. I think you learned a very specialized trait or skill set. And because you learned that, you're capable of learning whatever you want and being the best at that too. And when that unlocks in somebody's brain, like they can just become a monster for their own personal portfolio or helping other people or whatever it is they want to do in real estate,
Yeah, 100%. Dude, this has been an awesome conversation. We're running down to the end here, and we didn't even get into, we're going to have you on again, because we didn't even get into the cool stuff where, you built a portfolio of over 150 units. We didn't even do that.
That's
we've been
okay.
talking about 4 units, and we've been talking about mindset. We've been talking about how to get started in a high market, but I think we've shared just so many kind of nuggets and so many bits of wisdom for our audience who, like, a lot of them, they are stationed in San Diego. I mean, I can go and literally I can look on the podcast statistics and geolocate where the majority of our listeners come from. And I believe San Diego is the top market. I don't know why that is.
That's amazing.
Just is, you know, and then
Probably
like
because we've
Texas
had
is there
such
and
poor
Florida's there.
weather this winter. So people are just sitting inside instead of at the beach, you know?
That's right. That's right. Because podcasts obviously don't work at the beach. So, uh, uh, but yeah, man, I got to take you into the bonus round. It's the same
Okay.
4 questions we ask each and every guest. So let's go into that, and we will definitely be doing a follow-on podcast. It's going to be exciting. But question number 1 for you, Keegan: who is your biggest hero and why?
I'm like really compelled on these sorts of questions to go after like a historical figure, but it's my parents. Man, they just set such a good example. Like they've done more with less over and over and over. So it's my parents.
Yeah, I love it. And as I'm reading these questions for the longtime listeners out there, they're probably like, "You went out of order, Kevin. That's not the first question." You're right. It's not. I screwed up. Question number 1 is supposed to be, what book or software is really crushing it for you? So that is now question number 2, Keegan.
I've only read 2 real estate books ever.
That's impressive.
Rich Dad Poor Dad, Mindset. But the book that really crushed it for me was How to Create Wealth Investing in Real Estate, Grant Cardone. He said I'll sum it up for people who don't want to read it. The most important number in real estate isn't ROI. It's not cash on cash. It's not the dollar value of the asset. Most important number in real estate is number of doors. It solves all your problems.
That's interesting. Number of doors. Yeah. I mean, he's talking about scalability there. And if your door is there and it's actively producing income, then that becomes a thing that you can factor on scalability. And the great thing about number of doors is it's so quantifiable and it's so easy in people's head. Like if you go and talk to a novice and they're like, "Oh, cash on cash and this and that," they're like, "What the hell is that?" But if you break it down to, I own this number of doors. You know what a door is? That thing that you open and close at your house. I own this number of that. They can say, "Oh, okay, you know what you're talking about."
And it's not hard to do the math on that. Like, okay, single family home in Bay Park neighborhood in San Diego averages like 1.05 million. But a duplex in that neighborhood is like 1.4 and a threeplex is like 1.65. So you can like pretty easily see that more doors equals less dollars per door, but the rental income's about the same. You have the same fixed term debt. Like, this is going to hedge my bet on the downside if my doors are empty. And if they're full, I have much more scalability at a cheaper price.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the function of mathematics, which is why I'm such a math nerd, I think, these days. Question number 3 for you. What do you like to do for fun?
It varies with time. I'm really back on a physical fitness kick. I just saw it on Instagram this morning, so I'll shout him out. Troy Thompson, awesome guy, Naval Academy grad, posted something on Instagram that said, "Your body is your resume." I think that's so interesting. Like it's an outward reflection of your inward belief about yourself. So anything physical, right? You know, hopefully we get some better weather this summer and it's triathlon training. I can't decide if I'm like a pickup basketball player or a triathlete these days. I go back and forth. And I'm not doing either of them very well because the trainings don't help each other. But anything physically demanding to push yourself.
So since COVID, I decided to adopt the retirement sport of pickleball. And
Okay.
oh my God, I love it. Dude,
I've
I
heard
play
it's
like 3
addicting.
times a week. It is so addicting. That's all. Yes. And I have like a whole community now, and there's like courts right next to my house, and it's amazing. That's all I do.
And I'm sure that whole community knows tons of chiropractors if you need one because of the average age of the sport. So you're hooked up.
I should be raising money from the pickleball. Yeah, everyone's old and broken. No, dude, but I just love it, and it goes back to the time freedom thing. My wife, she works full time W-2, and she's like, "I don't understand. You can just like leave at 2 p.m. and go play pickleball for an hour." And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, what about work?" I was like, "I move my meetings around." Like, what do you do? And she's like, "I can't leave."
Right.
I was like, "Well, if you build the time freedom, guess what? You can."
Absolutely.
All right, man. So, final question for you. You've shared a lot of inspirational stories this podcast, this past 49 minutes here. I'm going to ask you for 3 nuggets, maybe to sum it up for folks who are listening, who are in that top geolocated market of San Diego, listening to this podcast or wherever, and they're trying to get started and they're facing those initial barriers that you faced, that I've faced. how the heck do you get over them from your position of like literally almost at the point of contemplating suicide to finding finding something that fulfills you to now finding massive success in real estate, like that journey. Talk about some nuggets of wisdom for folks who they might not be there yet, but they're listening to this podcast for a reason.
Yeah, I've got like an anecdotal story that might sum it up a little bit better. I think for me personally, right, drawing from subjective experience, I sought out people who were living the lifestyle and had the values that I wanted, and then tried to pursue them to be my mentors. And there are people from different walks of life. What was largely in common is that they had assets working for them. They had a deep faith in something much greater than themselves. For me, it's Christianity. And that they understood what their purpose was. And I didn't really understand what mine was. So there's a lot of like self-work that had to go into that. So the nugget would be, I think if there's three, right, it's like, you have to determine what your goals are and why, and how deep is that, and how strong is that? How willing are you to go after that? Then pursue someone that has that, right? And hopefully they'll be willing to take the time to teach you how to do that. Not that thing, but that lifestyle, right? Or that amount of free time, or that amount of passive cash flow, whatever it is. And then learn the skill set that they learned to do it. I think those would be the three. And the anecdotal story is kind of about understanding why you're doing what you're doing. We can get so caught up in the rat race, right? There's a story about like a guy goes down to Mexico and hires a fisherman, take him out to catch a fish. And the fisherman's been fishing for like 30, 40 years, takes him to this awesome fishing spot. And the guy catches the biggest fish he's ever caught in his life. And the guy's like, this is amazing. And this businessman who went on the boat and caught the fish, he's like, on the way back in, they had a long ride. And he's like, you know so much about fishing. You could rent other people's boats and hire out other guides and have like multiple people going out and paying you every day. And the fisherman's like, then what do you think I should do? He's like, well, then you'd have so much more income. You could buy multiple boats. You'd make even more margin, and you could send out 3, 4, 10 boats a day. He's like, then what do you think I should do? He's like, then you'd have so much money. You could have other people running all your boats and other captains captaining those boats, and you wouldn't even have to go fish. And he was like, then what do you think I should do? He was like, then you could spend all your time fishing. And the fisherman goes, I already do. And so like, you got to know why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And for some people, like if you just go fishing every day, that's great. Some people want 2 boats. Some people want 10 boats. Like, what do you want? Right. What's important to you?
Yeah. And answering that question will help stave off kind of the comparison, because everyone knows comparison is the thief of joy. And in today's world of social media and all of that, you're constantly being flooded in your face on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you use, of all of these success stories and people living literally their best lives, and then no one's failing, no one's doing this, and you get caught up, especially in the real estate world. You're like, man, this guy's got 1,000 doors, why don't I have 1,000 doors? Or this guy's got this, or this girl's got this, or this person's speaking on that stage and I should be speaking. It's all nonsense, because everyone's on their own path, everyone's on their own journey. And like you said, knowing why you're doing something, and if that is tied to an impact that you're making, like at ADPI, we are literally in the next 10 years, we set our target to physically positively impact 3 million military families.
That's a huge number.
And at our current rate, we look at it, it's like, yeah, is that a stretch goal or is that a reality? And we look at our numbers and how many people we've impacted already. And it's like, that's a stretch goal, but we're going to do it. It's there. It's within reach. And to understand that level of impact and what that means, it doesn't matter how many doors you have. Who cares? Do you have enough to put food on the table? Great. Create an impact, do something bigger than yourself, and seek out mentors that are doing those things. And like you said, that's an amazing nugget there, Keegan. Keegan Wetzel, man, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. For folks who want to get more from you, they want to get in touch with you. Maybe they want to, they want to, quote unquote, pick your brain. That's saying that I hate so much, but they want to talk to you. How can they do that, man?
I'm sure you guys will maybe put this in the show notes, but sure. Socials are just at Keegan Wetzel on Instagram. It's where I'm probably most active. I intend to get more active elsewhere, but I haven't yet. email and phone number. I can give you my phone number to put in the notes, and then email is just Keegan at Keegan Wetzel. So it's pretty easy.
Perfect. Yeah. So, I say this on all of our podcasts, but seriously, people, reach out to Keegan. If you're in the San Diego market, go buy the guy some lunch. He is training for something. He's into fitness. He probably wants lunch. Maybe he just came back from Italy. I bet the guy wants some pasta and pizza. I bet that's what he's into right now.
I'm not mad at it.
Smoke.
Secondhand smoke there is terrible. Poke bowls. I'll go get poke bowls with anybody anytime. That's the kick right now.
That's the kick. So go and buy the man some lunch. Learn from him. Understand what it is that he's doing, and you never know. It's like, find someone that's successful and you literally repeat exactly what they're doing. That's how you do it. There's no secret sauce. It's just determination. The secret is out, and it's called hard work. But you got to know what to do first. You got to educate yourself. You got to surround yourself with the right people. And Keegan is one of those people for sure. So
yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Definitely reach out and talk to him. Keegan, thank you so much for being on the podcast, man. We're going to have you on again because I got to get into this deeper story. There will be a part 2. And
there's certainly a formula. We definitely have a formula. Like, how do you max out your VA loan? How do you get the max number of units? How do you structure debt? Like, what are you doing for development? We've got a formula. So happy to dive into that.
Awesome, man. Well, until next time, I will see you later. And congratulations on getting married. And I wish you guys the best.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin.
All right. We'll see you next time, dude.